Still can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Could you confirm
Did
your
you ask
name
me a
and who you
question?
represent? Yeah. Who you
Oh,
representing
yeah.
here today?
Yeah, my name's Denny Dellinger, Dellinger Architects, representing Tower Development, the owners of Parkwood Place.
Okay. Great. Welcome. And are you expecting anyone else to join us here today on behalf of the applicant or owners?
Tower Leasing LLC. Yes, I anticipate that Brahma Ramanini will join us.
Okay. Would you like to wait for him before we get started, or would you like to go ahead and I can bring him in really at any time if he joins later? It's up to you.
Let's go ahead and start.
Okay, great. We also have Matt Lascheid here from the planning department. Welcome, Matt.
Yep.
Hey, good morning, David. Good morning, Denny.
All right, I'm going to read through the hearing script here, and then we'll begin. So this is the February 26, 2025 session of the zoning hearing examiner docket. The case before us today is case number ZH20250003. The purpose of this hearing is to allow applicants and any other parties to testify and to offer and refute evidence and testimony. This hearing will follow the rules found in the zoning code and the supplemental rules of the zoning hearing examiner. All testimony and evidence that an applicant or any other party wishes to offer must be presented at this hearing. The hearing will proceed as follows. The applicant, the applicant's owner, or the applicant's, the applicant's attorney or the applicant's agent will first present the applicant's case. If we did have anyone here from the public, they'd have an opportunity to speak after the applicant had presented its case. I'll hear from the planning department and Mr. Lascheid to provide any testimony that's just in addition to his staff report. In the event that any party testifies or offers argument in opposition to this application, the applicant will have an opportunity to rebut that testimony offered in opposition. And then finally, the applicant will have an opportunity to make any closing statements. After all presentations have been made, I will close the hearing. Decisions may be expected within 2 weeks. I may limit or exclude any testimony that I deem irrelevant or outside the scope of the application being considered. I may interrupt any speaker to ask questions or to make any comments. Let's see. In the event of any technical difficulties, I'll do my best to troubleshoot those issues on the fly, but to the extent there's a defect that prevents us from meaningfully going forward with this hearing, I may continue to postpone the hearing at my discretion. All right, so last thing I need to do is just swear in all of our witnesses. So if you intend on providing any testimony here today, the zoning code requires that I swear you in. So if that's you, if you could please raise your right hand. I need everyone to answer out loud. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Looks like someone's trying to join us here. I'll go ahead and let that individual in. Just give me one minute. All right. Welcome, sir. If you could go ahead and unmute for me.
Yes,
All right. And could you give me your full name and spell it, please?
it's Brahma Ramineni. It's Brahma. Last name is Ramineni.
Ramamini?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. And you are the owner of the property, is that right?
I'm one of the owners. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Welcome. I just got everyone checked in and went through a spiel about the procedure. In short, I'm going to allow you and Mr. Dillinger to tell me about the project and why they believe, well, looks like we have one more person joining us here. Give me 1 minute, sorry. Okay, welcome, Hari Ramamini. I was just getting everyone checked in here. My name is David Sturkey. I'm the zoning hearing examiner for the city. I'll be presiding over the hearing. If you could just unmute for me for just 1 minute. Okay, great. And could you just confirm your name is Hari Ramamini?
Yes, my name is Hari Ramineni.
Okay, great. And you are one of the owners of the property, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. I was just going through the procedural outline of how the hearing will be conducted. Essentially, I'm going to give the owners and the applicants an opportunity to tell me about the project, any background they think is important, what exactly it is that they're proposing, and the relief that they're requesting and why they believe that relief is appropriate and why I should approve it. One of you can speak, all of you can speak. It's really up to you how you want to orient that presentation. I'll leave it up to you all. But generally those are the type of things that people cover during their presentation. I'll then hear from the planning department. They have a representative here, Mr. Lashide. He'll provide any testimony in addition to his staff report. I'll give you all an opportunity to respond to his testimony, and then make any closing statements. I'll have some questions along the way, and then we'll wrap it up. If either Brahma or Hari are intending on providing any testimony here today, I'll need to swear you in. So if will either of you be speaking at all today, or do you think it'll just be Mr. Dillinger?
I will speak just for a few minutes and then I'm ready for swearing in.
Great. Okay, fantastic. And so
I will swear in also, just in case I need to speak.
okay, great. If you could both raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, great. Thank you both. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. Who's going to be taking the lead here? Mr. Dillinger, will you start us off?
Yes.
Okay, the
Sure.
floor is yours.
Thank you. First off, when I reviewed the application that Matt prepared and submitted to you, I was surprised that a lot of the information that I submitted was not included, and I'd like to make sure that that is included and that I have an opportunity to explain further what we're about. And first off, in the application, it identifies. It says the community is Clifton, but the auditor's plat book says that the appraisal neighborhood was Avondale, and I believe it is Avondale rather than Clifton. But at any rate, I'd like to read the letter that I submitted December 9th, 2024 to the zoning hearing examiner via Matt for 3 Parkwood Place. Written statement explaining in detail the basis of our appeal for a special exception. The apartment building at 3 to 5 Parkwood Place has 4 dwelling units and all 4 residents have cars. There is an existing parking lot on the west side of the building that can accommodate 3 cars. On-street parking is not permitted on this section of Vine Street on either side of the street. All of the buildings on the opposite side of Vine Street have driveways, many with parking in the rear yard. On-street parking is only permitted on the north side of Parkwood Place. This street ends in a cul-de-sac, and all of the other buildings on the street are single-family houses with a driveway. These further limit the number of available parking spaces to only 6 spaces to serve 13 single-family homes and 4 apartments in the 3 to 5 Parkwood Place building. We revised our original plan to comply with the requirements of DOTE. The city has recently made significant revisions to the zoning code to permit and encourage greater density of housing for residents to combat the affordable housing crisis. Connected Communities is the name given to a package of zoning and land use policy reforms put forward by Mayor Aftab Turaval and council members Reggie Harris and Jeff Cramerding in partnership with the Department of City Planning and Engagement. The policies were approved by City Council on June 5th, 2024, and went into effect July 1st, 2024. The goal of Connected Communities is to help Cincinnati grow into a more accessible, people-focused, diverse, healthy, and connected community for all. The changes are targeted around public transportation lines and neighborhood business districts to support our community assets and increase population where it makes the most sense. Providing adequate parking for residents is clearly a compelling need. On-street parking is very limited in this area. The owners have met with residents and received 18 letters supporting this request, and the letters were included with the application. I'd like to read one of those letters later. We composed a letter and then they circulated it to several other people, or 18 people, and everybody they asked to sign it, signed it. So please grant this special exception request as it helps to satisfy a compelling need and it has clear support of neighbors. We feel that approval of our special request maximizes both the public interest and private benefit. Approval of this proposed special exception will help relieve the demand for on-street parking in this that is already severely limited. Many of the driveways are used for parking by residents, with cars parked within the required front yard setback. Approval of our request is compatible with the predominant prevailing land use, building and structure patterns of the neighborhood surrounding the proposed development, and will have a material net cumulative positive impact on the neighborhood. Granting this request will have a positive effect on the promotion of the Cincinnati economy. It will increase tax valuation of the property, providing additional tax revenue. Private benefits to the owner and tenant include providing needed amenities to keep the units rented and occupied, avoiding the possibility of blight if tenants remain in the property because if they have adequate parking, they will remain. The residents who park here will be more likely to stay if they do not have to park an excessive distance from the property due to the limited on-street parking. Public benefits will include public peace, as people will be less likely to argue over limited parking availability, and improved health, safety, and general welfare. Please grant this special exception. And then also, there were a couple of, I think, very significant aerial photographs that I presented, and Matt may have the ability to share those with you now, I'm not sure. But one of them was an aerial view that went from Mitchell Avenue south a couple of blocks, including Parkwood Place. And it clearly shows the 13 houses on Parkwood Place, each with a driveway and a car parked where available on the north side of the street only. And because it's interrupted in driveways, you could only get one spot between driveways. So there's 6, maybe 7 spaces, depending on how close to Vine Street they park. And then it also shows all of the houses on Vine Street. Almost, I think all of them have driveways, and many of them have cars parked in the driveways. I expect almost all of them have cars parked in the driveways in the evening when people are home from work. I'm not sure what time of day these aerial photographs were taken. And another was a closer view of the property with the existing gravel parking lot that was installed. And so those, I think, clearly indicate that parking in the front yard is clearly happening. Some of them, or most of them in driveways. And then I had 4 additional photographs that showed the existing conditions and the curb cut and things that I think were significant in presenting our case. And let me take a minute here to review some other notes I have here.
Sure. Well, while you're doing that, let me welcome. It looks like we had a couple folks join us a little bit late. It looks like Pamela Bias Daniels. Are you with us? And if so, could you unmute? To the 2 women on the screen. I have you as Pamela Bias Daniels. Could you unmute? Great.
Yes.
Okay. Are you all here to participate in the Parkwood Place hearing?
We are. This is my
great.
sister.
Okay. So we have Pamela Bias Daniels, and then the name of the other woman there. Looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties on our end. I did not catch anything you just said. Could you each give me your names if you can hear me? So we'll have to wait, I think, a minute on that. I'm going to go ahead and mute them again. Mr. Dillinger, have you collected your thoughts?
Most of them. I'm looking at the report that was submitted by Matt to you, and the first photograph shows 3 cars parked in the rear parking lot, and this was sometime prior to the installation of the gravel parking lot on the Vine Street frontage. But you can see 2 cars parked on the north side of Parkwood Place, and another car parked on the south side of Parkwood Place illegally, which I'm sure is not an unusual situation. And then, let's see. Let's see. I understand that the parking is restricted in the front yards typically, but I maintain that this is very much a non-typical situation. None of the other properties have front yards that don't have cars parked in them on various occasions in the driveway within the required front yard setback. So
Mr.
having these
Dillinger,
few cars, yes.
sorry, go ahead.
Having these few additional cars in the front yard on Vine Street is insignificant, basically, is what I maintain. And we are providing landscaping that will help screen some of that. So I don't think some of the comments about the undesirability of adverse effects and that sort of thing in the report were really appropriate. I think it is compatible with the neighborhood, as there are other cars parked in front of houses in the neighborhood on a routine basis. And there's no parking on Vine Street. There's half the parking that there would normally be on a residential street because of the width of the street. And the fact that 18 property owners and residents in the neighborhood have written letters, and I don't know why they weren't submitted, but I'm going to read one of them so you know what they stated. This was from Tower Leasing LLC. Dear neighbor, Tower Leasing LLC is the owner of the 4-unit apartment building at 3 to 5 Parkwood Place at the corner of Parkwood and Vine Street. We are seeking approval from the City of Cincinnati Board of Zoning Appeals to complete the parking lot, which will provide additional parking for our residents and their guests. As you know, parking is very limited on Parkwood Place and is restricted to the north side of the street. Parking on Vine Street is prohibited at all times in this area. Tower Leasing wants to be able to provide off-street parking for our residents and their guests. This creates more of the very limited parking for our neighbors, their guests, and delivery persons. We hope that you will express your support in this project. And that was, the first letter was signed by Angela Gonciorowski. She's a tenant at Parkwood Place. And there are 18 other letters signed by other folks in the immediate neighborhood that I think should have been submitted and should be considered as an important voice of the neighborhood expressing their concerns about the conditions and the limited parking that's available. So those are the main reasons that I think it should be approved. Oh, also, by the way, I did have conversations with Angie Strunk of DOTE, and she said that DOTE would be willing to approve this, even though it was not necessarily their ideal condition. But the report to you said it was not approved, I believe, by DOTE. And of course, it hasn't been approved because it hasn't been submitted yet officially. But I believe it would be if it was submitted. So, Brahma, Harry, do you have any additional comments, or can I answer it?
Before we get into that, let me just ask a couple questions on some of the things you mentioned there. And one, I'll say that it does look like in our project docs system that there were attempts to upload approximately 18 letters of support here. On my end, I'm not seeing that they actually made it. There was just an attempt to upload those. Either way, they will become a part of the record, and all the other materials that were submitted prior to this hearing will become a part of the record and will be reviewed. I wanted to ask, you mentioned several times that there are other cars that park in their driveways and front yards, and having done a few of these front yard parking applications before, my understanding is that the way that the planning department interprets front yard parking is that if the parking space, the driveway that's in the front yard leads to a parking space that is on the side or the rear of the home, that is not technically front yard parking, and that, as you may imagine, it would be nearly impossible to try to enforce folks that have driveways in their front yards, which is almost all driveways, and do some sort of enforcement where you don't let them park in those driveways. So I think that the compromise that in terms of the interpretation is, you have a driveway going through your front yard, which again, most do, but it leads to a parking space in the back, that is not going to be considered front yard parking. And if you decide to park a car in that front yard, there's no mechanism to enforce or to restrict you from where you park your car, as long as you have the opportunity to park it in the back. So knowing that that is the interpretation that has been used, how many of the driveways or parking for adjacent properties that you mentioned don't have a parking space on the side or the rear? So how many of those driveways that you mentioned, you see cars parked in the driveway, how many of them don't have the ability to park those cars outside of the front yard? Do you know that? I mean, it's probably don't know that offhand, but
I'm looking
I guess
at
maybe
the
another way to ask it, Denny, is how many properties along Vine Street in this vicinity have parking pads that only exist in the front yard? Just a front yard parking pad, because that's essentially what this is. This is simply a
I
driveway,
kind of
is it?
drive through there all the time, and my observation is literally all of them. Basically, what you have is you have like Cape Cod style homes. That's like, I would say, $100,000 in value, and they all have these garages that go up under the house. And the garage is real small with old raggedy, or sometimes they are not inoperable. And there is a front parking driveway where people will pull in. Nobody goes into the garage because they're all old and obsolete, and they just park in the front on the pad.
Gotcha. So you're not aware of any other properties along Vine Street in the vicinity that have only a front yard pad that doesn't lead to a garage or a side or a rear parking area? Is that
There's
right?
quite a few like that.
There are some? Okay.
Yes.
Because as I do just a preliminary sort of cursory overview of a satellite view, it looks like I can't find any individual parking pads along Vine Street, residential anyway, that are front yard parking pads without any rear access. Looks like maybe at 3897. Okay.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
I'm looking at this aerial photograph that I submitted, and it shows directly across Vine Street, 2 cars parked in a parking lot or parking area, definitely in the front yard, just barely off the sidewalk. Now, there are 1 or 2 driveways that lead to parking in the rear that have relatively limited parking. And then there's up the street here, there's another one parked in what's only a front yard spot.
There's one,
further south.
the address is 3930. If when I zoomed in, they have 2 cars parking leading to nowhere.
But what I see when I'm looking at this particular photograph, and this, I don't know what time of day this was taken. It was a zoom photograph. It was daylight. There were plenty of leaves on the trees, but I'm looking at Parkwood Place. It ends as a cul-de-sac. And at the end of the cul-de-sac, there's a house that's got 2 cars parked directly in the front driveway, all the way to the sidewalk. On the south side of the street, there's the next house has 3 cars parked in the front yard. Across on the other side of the cul-de-sac, there's a car parked in the front yard. And then a couple doors down on the north side of the street, there's 2 cars parked in the driveway. They may be able to get further back, but they're currently parked right at the sidewalk. House next door, same thing. House next door has a deeper driveway with a garage in the back and 2 cars in the driveway, but not in the front yard. The next house has a car in the front yard. The next house has a car parked in the front yard. The next house has a parking pad that's 2 cars wide that's parked just beyond what would be considered the front yard. Again, on the south side of Parkwood, there's at least 2 more houses with cars parked in the front yard in this daylight photograph. And I maintain, and Harry can justify too, that most people are at work during the day and don't have their cars parked where they will be parked after they come home from work in the evening.
Yeah, Denny, I'm sharing my screen. I don't know the
I see
photo
that now.
exactly that
Okay.
you're
Yeah.
referencing and you
Well,
list
that's
here.
the
This is
same
from
street, I
August
believe.
2009, so this is really not the best reference point. But as I look at the south here, seeing a garage, I'm seeing a carport on the side. I'm seeing again, and this is just one question I had. This is not a make or break type question, but I'm seeing that virtually all of them on Park Place either have a place to pull to the side. I see a rear garage here. I see a garage here. I see a rear side here. That they virtually all, even garages here, but they virtually all have places, parking spaces that are not in the front yard. So, even this one, I think you said across the street, it looks like there might be a garage over there. Again, this is not the best evidence to use, and I'm required to do site visits, so I can go and take a look at what the actual what it looks like on the ground. I think this may be a garage, but anyway, that was just one question I had, because as I looked on this view, guys, it looked like most of these places along Vine Street either had garages to pull in or led to garages, or led to side parking or rear parking. This is the type of thing I'm talking about right here. Looks like this is a corner lot that doesn't, unless it shares this driveway, doesn't have any off-street parking. You can see some other multifamilies here that have rear.
Street is wider and allows parking on both sides of the streets too, I believe.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, that's just something I was looking at, and one question I wanted to just sort of parse out that distinction between people parking in their driveways that lead to rear parking spots, or just having no way to park at all in the rear. Another question, you've mentioned connected communities. Does connected communities, I know that the goals were to increase density and try to increase the amount of housing in the city, in certain areas of the city. Are there any restrictions in the new connected communities legislation that talks about how to handle parking with this new density?
I'm not sure that's addressed in the connected communities aspect, other than not requiring parking in certain neighborhoods, which I believe is disastrous and over the Rhine. And there needs to be accommodations to, face the facts that people drive cars, and we're not a totally walkable community. We're not Manhattan. We're never going to be. And people need cars. And if we're going to have a community where people live and work and prosper, they got to have a place to put their car.
Sure. Thanks. And to that point, I just want to make sure I have some of the information correct here. So this is a 4-unit multifamily building, is that right?
Yes, all 2-bedroom units.
Okay, and the existing parking lot on the side has space for 3 cars, is that right?
Well, I think 3 cars can be parked in there where each person could get out without another one moving. But Matt has a diagram here that shows 4 cars parked 2 abreast, but you can't really do that without blocking somebody in. And so there, and now I've seen photographs. One of the aerial photographs I think I have or had shows 5 cars parked in that lot, but only 2 of them could get out without moving another car.
Okay, and how many parking spaces will so this is a parking pad that's already been built. Was it built last year or sometime before that?
No. It's a long time ago with the building originally, I believe. Do you know Harry or Brahma?
Probably Harry, you're muted.
It's probably when the building was constructed. Obviously, we have 2 parking pads now. The proposed parking pad has been already installed, but not paved yet. and that's where we got in trouble, and that's why we are here to start with. The because of we want to pull a permit and get everything back on order and do everything legally. So that's why we are discussing. But the Parkwood side parking lot, that's probably was put in when the building was constructed.
Yeah, so the unpermitted parking lot that we're discussing today, that is the scope of what we're discussing, right? Just the one along Vine?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. When was that one installed?
That was already there for some time back, for when we got the building, but not that big. There was just one or two cars just pulling in there, and then that was like that, and then it was causing dirt and unpleasant conditions, and it's just looking bad. So we just cleaned it up
Okay.
and put more gravel there.
When did you acquire the property?
I would say approximately 10 years ago.
10 years ago, there was a parking pad there?
There was, yeah, people were parking cars. It wasn't
Oh, it wasn't
full-
paved.
It wasn't paved, full-fledged parking, but it's basically bare soil, and people were pulling in there.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm looking at the Cages aerials. You'll see here it has it by year. So going back to 2006, doesn't look like there was anything. Again, if people are parking in the grass, that's not going to necessarily show up here. But as we go to 2011, 2017, 2019, 2020, 2021, is that not going to show up for us? Okay. Yeah. 2022, 2023. Yeah, I think that's the most recent they have. Let's see this one. Okay, this one must be more recent, must be 2024, but it looks like as recent as 2023, there is no parking pad. And again, people may have been parking there, but it looks like there's grass. And, so when did you pave it? I guess maybe is a better question.
I would say approximately 2 years ago.
Okay, got it. All right, and how many parking spaces does this provide? Just this portion alone?
2.
We have design now proposes 3 parking spots.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all the questions that I have right now. Anything you want to say based on my questions before I move to the public and let Matt testify here?
I'd like to say that I think it's great that you say you will make a visit to the property to, try to confirm what the conditions are at the time you're there. And I would encourage you to go sometime after normal working hours when it's likely that most of the people are home and parking their car.
Sure.
Rather than midday when it might be convenient for you and everybody else has gone to work. So that would, I don't think, give you a realistic impression of this conditions.
Sure. Yeah, that makes total sense. And yeah, I think that's something I can do after hours. Absolutely. One more question I did think of. You mentioned landscaping. What is the proposed landscaping around this? And has that been, has the landscaping been installed yet?
There's a little bit of landscaping adjoining the building. I'm not sure what kind of bushes there are. They're low bushes, not really trimmed as a hedge. But we were proposing to extend the same kind of planting around the perimeter of the new parking area to provide some screening from Vine Street.
Got it.
It
Okay,
didn't
so
specify the plant type, but I had presumed that it would be the same plant type, and I don't know what that is off the top of my head.
got it. So, hopefully you can see my screen here again, Mr. Dellinger, but
Okay, yeah,
there's some rose bushes back there.
Right, right. I don't know what kind of bushes they are, but they're
They look like
green.
rose. They look like rose to me, but I'm not a professional on that
Harry or
subject.
Brahma, do you know?
It's not important. Is this the extent of the landscaping though that's proposed, or will there be additional
No, it
landscaping
would
to
be
buffer?
there where you just, yeah,
That-
there
they are
and then
rose
on the
bush.
other side.
They are rose
They are-
bushes.
Oh, boy. Okay.
So there will be additional landscaping here of, you're proposing rose bushes along this property line, is that right? And is there any along the Vine Street frontage or the frontage along Parkwood Place here proposed?
I think the plan that I'm looking at, that I have the print of in front of me is not the most recent plan. I think, and Matt might be able to confirm this, I think we showed landscaping on both edges of the parking lot.
So this edge and this edge?
Yes,
Okay, got it.
and we
Right.
certainly could do that.
Okay, you wouldn't be able to do any landscaping along this, correct?
Not really. It's a tight situation and we definitely don't want people to be backing out on Vine Street. So, they might have to take more than one maneuver to get their car turned around.
If that is the sticking point, we're on Vine Street, we need to do some landscaping, you want some fence, we can incorporate that into it. Leave like 3 feet green space and put some rose bushes or whatever the shrubbery, or you want like a wooden fence so you won't see the cars.
Great. I appreciate that. Okay, that is the last question that I have right now. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to really quickly try to get back in touch with Miss Bias Daniels. I muted you. If you could unmute again. I don't know if you wanted to add any testimony or any comments to this conversation, but if so, I'll need to swear each of you in before you provide that testimony. Everyone who's testified here today has been sworn. The zoning code requires it. So would you like to provide some testimony?
Not really, excuse me, not really testimony, but we're just here to find out what's going on.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, if you haven't totally gathered so far.
And I'm Patricia Bias McCall. There are two
Got
names
it.
there.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Essentially, we're here because the applicants have installed and I'll show it again, have installed a parking pad in the front yard of the property here. This is right at the corner of Parkwood Place and Vine. It did not go through the permitting process. And so so it doesn't comply with the zoning code, which was discovered after it was installed. And so they're now trying to go back through the process to make sure that this parking pad is properly permitted. Essentially, they're asking for some zoning relief or an exception from the zoning code to allow a parking pad in the front yard. Parking pads generally are not allowed in front yards throughout the city. And so that's why we're here today. They're asking for the city to make that exception to allow them to have that parking pad. And that's the extent of the relief that they're requesting. So anything you wanted to say in relation to that, or do you just want to continue to observe?
Just
Okay.
observe.
Okay, great. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your question. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over and I'm just going to keep everyone on mute who's not currently talking. Turn it over to Matt from the planning department. He did a staff report on this and has some analysis. Matt, do you want to add anything?
Thank you, David. Yeah, I think you made a good point earlier. You're correct in the zoning code's interpretation of front yard parking. You're allowed to have a driveway that leads to a permitted parking space. And actually, in a lot of the city, you're required to have one parking space per dwelling unit. So other homes in the area that have a parking space in the backyard or the side yard or in the garage are allowed to have a driveway that leads to it, and in fact may be required to. And as you correctly noted, we don't enforce where people park their car if they're parking on the driveway that leads to a permitted parking space. They're allowed to do that. The zoning relief that's requested here is for front yard parking for a separate parking pad that is in a non-permitted area being in the front yard. City of Cincinnati zoning code pretty uniformly prohibits front yard parking in all single family districts and the RMX district. The intent of that requirement is to preserve the aesthetic character of our neighborhoods so that folks walking on the sidewalk, well, A, they're not interfered with by having cars coming past them all the time. And also so that as you're traveling through the right of way, you can see the architecture and the landscaping of the neighborhoods, and not vehicles. So it's for safety and aesthetic purposes. So to request an exception to that, it's a special exception. So there's some standards that we go through in the zoning code. Is the project consistent with the purpose of the Cincinnati zoning code and the RMX district? Generally, no. I mean, the intent of these districts is to be residential in nature. One purpose is to create pedestrian-friendly environments to reduce reliance on the automobile for travel. Certainly having a parking pad that crosses the sidewalk in the front yard is contrary to that intent. No substantial impairment of property value. It's not clear. I think the applicant may make a point that having more parking may benefit some neighbors. I don't think that standard is really very clear here, but it may benefit them if there's less competition for on-street parking. No undue adverse impact. There is some concern about the location of the curb cut. And Mr. Dellinger indicated that he spoke with DOT, so I don't know if that may be true, probably, but generally I know that their requirement is that you can't have a curb cut within 50 feet of an intersection for traffic safety, so that you're not creating more accidents with people pulling out of the driveway as folks are turning around the intersection. And it looks like on the site plan, the proposed driveway is about 28 feet from the intersection, so it would not be compliant with that requirement. And also, you can't have a driveway within 5 feet of a storm drain so that folks aren't driving over public infrastructure and destroying public infrastructure with their vehicles. So there is some concern of undue adverse impact there. Same answer to compliance with other standards. They would need permitting for the work, and it would need to be reviewed by all applicable city agencies. I suppose there is, I do agree there's, need for parking, certainly. The site has a parking pad that's compliant in the backyard already. I would ask the applicant or Mr. Dellinger if you could answer, is this parking lot in the back that exists, is that parking lot striped already? And do you have signage that says this space is for unit 1, this space is for unit 2? How is the existing parking lot managed?
We can probably answer that best. Or Brahma.
It's first comes, first served, so whoever is in, they're in.
Okay, thank you. I did a site visit about 2 weeks ago. I was trying to see sometimes parking, especially if there's competition for spaces, apartment complexes will sometimes say this parking stall is for unit 1, this parking stall is for unit 2, unit 3. That helps to alleviate some of the concerns that were expressed here. And I know it's tight back there. I tried to make a quick sketch showing like parallel parking. I'm not an architect, I will admit that. So Mr. Dellinger may be able to help. It's definitely big enough for 3 cars.
It's really a narrow lot, and it's not really compliant with the normal parking standards that you would try to have for driveway widths and all that. But they manage. There are, I believe, some trash cans, containers in the backyard too that I believe it's probably can accommodate 3 cars that could get in and out without having to move one of them. Is
Okay.
that, do you believe that, Brahma?
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. So with that, I mean, there's parking for, I'll say at least 3 cars. There's on-street parking in the area. There's a 24-hour bus line that runs right past this property. So I think it's difficult for me to understand the necessity for parking that's otherwise prohibited.
If this was like a 1-bedroom building, it's probably acceptable, but being 2 bedrooms, we have minimum 2 cars per unit. We have 8 cars there. The street is very tight. There's nothing you can do with that. I mean, that's what it is. By having this extra space, and we can accommodate your guidance. I mean, do more landscaping, whatever, reduce it to two car parking, much smaller area. We could do that too. But by having this, you'll actually doing a gesture for the building, for the neighborhood, and for the residents on the streets.
And I would like
Thanks.
to add,
Hold on, Hari, real quick. Let's let Matt finish his comments. You all will have a chance to respond to anything he says, but let's let him go ahead and finish up. We are starting to get close to the 11 o'clock hour, but we'll have to break. So Matt, is there anything else you want to say before we turn it back over to the applicants?
Thank you, Mr. Sturkey. Another question was raised. I'm sharing my screen here if you guys can see it. The site plan that shows the proposed conditions. There is no landscaping that's proposed between Vine Street and the parking area. That doesn't impact the zoning relief that's required here. I just wanted to point that out since there was a question about that. If you wanted to amend your application materials to include landscaping, I'm not sure if you're able to do that, but right now, there's no landscaping proposed. But again, the zoning relief required is still for front yard parking. Doesn't really impact our review too much. So with that, the application materials, although thorough, do not meet the zoning code standards for variances or for special exceptions. It's not compatible with the neighborhood. There are no other properties in the immediate vicinity with a front yard parking pad like what's proposed. And there is some concern about adverse impacts, both for pedestrian and traffic safety and for aesthetics. So for those reasons, staff recommends denial.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate your work on the staff report and your testimony here today. Okay. As I mentioned in just a minute ago, I do schedule these on the hour, so I have an 11 o'clock that I'll need to start here in a minute. We can go right up until that point. Mr. Dellinger, do you think that'll be enough to respond to Mr. Lascheid's comments and make closing arguments?
Yeah, I think so. And I'd just like to say that on Parkwood Place, there are 6, maybe 7 legal parking spots to serve 12 single-family houses and 4-unit apartment building. And then additionally, there's no parking off-street on Vine Street to serve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, an apartment building that might have some parking. But a lot of people are competing for parking spots here. I wouldn't be surprised if some people try to park in the Walgreens parking lot if they could get away with it and walk several blocks. But I can't say I've witnessed that happening, but I don't know where in the hell else they'd park. Unless they found a street a couple blocks away that had legal parking on it.
Well, most of these houses do have driveways, side and rear parking areas or garages, right? I mean, let's take
Right, most
Parkwood
of
Place,
them
for
do,
instance. You said there's
but-
18 single-family homes, but I'm counting basically all of them have driveways and or side
Most of them
and rear
have
parking areas.
cars parked in the driveways that, would be comparable to cars parked in the front yard of Parkwood Place on Vine Street. So I think from an aesthetic kind of a statement that having cars in the front yard is not something anybody wants, is something that everybody else is doing and has the advantage of doing.
I understand that argument. I do. I get it.
That's why we're asking for a special exception.
Okay, great. Is there anything I know that Hari, I cut you off earlier. Is there anything you wanted to say?
So in closing, basically what I would like to say is there's very limited street parking. There's no street parking on Vine Street. And then on Parkwood, there's in-between driveways where you cannot park a car. And then there was times I went by the building and was literally had to leave, nowhere to park. I tried everything, and then I'm like, let me just come back a different day and time. And then we also have trash cans because this building is 4 units. We need to have Rumpke to service them. So that will take some space. And then I do have a handicapped tenant that's requesting reasonable accommodation and saying, hey, can you make sure my wheelchair access van pick up and drop off? I guess it's done by somebody else. And then it's just becoming an issue. Even the mailman is having an issue to find parking spot to deliver mail. And then he is using our parking. And he was nice enough. He is saying, hey, can I please use your parking because I don't have nowhere to park.
Okay,
That's all I have.
sure. I appreciate that. Real quick, to the Bias Daniels, I assume
Bias-
sisters.
Yes,
Just real quick, if you'd like to add something, I'll have to swear you in.
oh, yes, I'll
so-
be sworn in, yes,
Okay, could you raise
I
your
have a
right hand?
yes,
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I will.
Okay, what would you like to tell me?
I have a question. Did the gentleman say that there's parking on both sides of the street at Parkwood Place?
No, I think
Only on
their
the
testimony
north
is that
side.
it's only on the north side that parking is
Yeah.
allowed.
That's correct. That's correct.
Sure,
Thank you.
no problem. Thanks for your question. Okay, we have a few more minutes here. Anything else from the applicants or owners before we adjourn?
I
Nothing.
do.
Hearing-
I mean, what is where can we go next if you're denying this?
So if this is denied, then you have 30 days to file an appeal with the Zoning Board of Appeals. And that is a group that a volunteer board that reviews any appeals of my decisions or appeals from the Historic Conservation Board. And so that would be the next step if this was denied.
Understood. But hopefully, if we don't get denied, do your drive-by, and we hope and humbly request the city to do this accommodation. Nowadays, everything need to be done. There's something called reasonable accommodation. Everybody comes to us and asks for it, and we try our level best to accommodate it. And we're asking the city to see what you guys can do.
Sure, I understand that. And let me say, I think this is a difficult case just because of some of the arguments that you have made. I know that some of these streets that were platted and, oriented long before the modern zoning code do create some practical difficulties. So I am sympathetic to that. And like I said, I would like to go and actually get on the ground here and not just rely on the outdated satellite imagery as I make this decision and get a better feel for the neighborhood. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to review all the application materials. I'm also going to make sure that we have all of those letters properly uploaded so that I can review the letters of support from surrounding property owners. After I've reviewed all the evidence and visited the site, I'll make a determination. I'll put that determination in writing. I think Mr. Dellinger is familiar with this process, but as soon as I finish that, I'll put it into a PDF and I'll email it to everybody who's in the hearing here today. So you all will have a copy of that really just moments after it's complete. If it is denied, like I said, you can contact our office and file an appeal to the Zoning Board of Appeals. If it's approved, then Mr. Lashad can approve the zoning permitting on his end, and you all can take the next steps in the permitting process. Any questions about any of that? Okay, hearing none. I think we will go ahead and adjourn here today. I want to thank everyone again for their time and their testimony. If you have any questions in the meantime, I'm happy to answer those. I can't take in any more evidence or testimony. So if you think of something you wanted to say or an argument or a picture or anything that hasn't been submitted prior to this hearing or testified at this hearing, I can't consider any of that at this point. The hearing is closed, but if you have a procedural question, I'm happy to answer those. Or if you just want a status update on the decision, I'm happy to provide that to you as well. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and we are adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.